I wanna help you be free. I can hear you call. I'm here to help you all. They call me the Huntress, you see. I wanna help you be free.
Have you ever fantasized about buried treasure? I have. Have you ever thought of where you would find that buried treasure? A sunken ship? What about an island out in the South Pacific from a notorious pirate buried? Have you ever given any thought that maybe it's like right here on dry land in New Hampshire? Bet you didn't think of that one, huh? What would you say if I told you, I know where there's some buried treasure here in New Hampshire? Yes, I do. I want to take us back in history to 1656, to the first settler of Merrimack, New Hampshire, John Cromwell. He buried his treasure here. What I'm going to do is tell you the story about John Cromwell and why the treasure's buried here and still buried here. Maybe we can get him to tell us why. Come on.
The journey to get to the location of John Cromwell's encampment was very long and tiring, but the scenery was absolutely beautiful. We came across an abundance of wildlife. A beaver in the river. It was so cool.
Hey, there's Cromwell Falls. It's right there.
And then at last, we're here.
We are in the approximate location of the first settler of Merrimack, New Hampshire, John Cromwell, in 1656. The reason we know this is because Jonathan Danforth did a survey of the Merrimack River, and he found John Cromwell in a cabin selling furs to the Indians, and that was documented and confirmed by the General Court of Massachusetts in 1657. There's not much known about John Cromwell, but one thing we do know is he came from London, England, and he settled in Charlestown, Massachusetts several years before 1656. He was a planter and he was a Puritan. He was actually one of the original owners of a pew, number 90, and an original member of the Charlestown Church in Charlestown, Massachusetts. Now, researching where the house was no easy task. We went to the local historian, Scott McPhee, in Merrimack, New Hampshire. We went to the Nashua Public Library, the Merrimack Public Library, and dug through all their archived records for maps, locations, historical documentations from different reverends at the time that knew of John Cromwell. And the location was simple. It was south of Thornton's Ferry and north of Pennachuck Brook, near Cromwell Falls, which is right now the property of Anheuser-Busch Brewery. That's right. Now, what does this all have to do with buried treasure? Well, I'm going to tell you. John Cromwell owned a trading post where he did a lot of business with the Indians up and down the Merrimack River. He traded blankets and rum for furs. He took the furs, he exchanged them for gold coin. Customary in those days, in 1656, people used a pound stone. Actually, he used his own foot for a pound stone. And what is a pound stone? A pound stone, every pound is equal to 14 pounds. Imperial system of weights and measures. Look that up in Google. So, the story goes like this. The Indians thought John Cromwell was cheating them with the pound stone because he used to place his foot on the weight to be the pound stone. The Indians didn't like it. So they decided they were going to burn his house down and run him out of town. John Cromwell heard of this plan the Indians had for him, and you know what he did? He buried his treasure and left town for good. The Indians were so hot on his trail, some were quoted as saying they thought they saw him leave. Well, they burnt his place to the ground and destroyed all the property around him. That's what they did because they were mad. There's something I've just got to say in John Cromwell's defense. John Cromwell in 1656 was a squatter on his property. The owner of that property was William Brenton. William Brenton also had a trading post for the Indians. William Brenton didn't want any competition. And it is believed and documented in the history books that William Brenton authored the tradition that a foot be used as poundstone. Yep. So greed can affect many people in many different ways. But the one thing that does remain is the treasure is still here. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back tonight and we're going to contact John Cromwell and we're going to ask him exactly what happened that fateful night he got burnt and run out of town and left his treasure behind. Now I'm going to try to contact John Cromwell. What I'm going to use to contact him with is a pendulum like this. You can pick these up at stores. If you don't have a pendulum, what you can use is your necklace, like this. I'm going to hold this as still as possible, and I'm going to ask him to move the pendulum. And when he moves it, that means we've made contact.
Did you feel that?
Yes, I actually did. John Cromwell, if this is where you had the encampment, please move the pendulum. It's moving. It's moving. Take some pictures now. I'm using a Polaroid Instamatic camera, and I found that using all different kind of camera mediums is an excellent way to catch orbs. And one near the tree. I thought I felt some cold air. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contact John Cromwell through an EVP, and that is basically talking to the dead. And I have that right here. I feel something over this direction here. Mr. Cromwell, why did the Indians come and attack you and burn down your home, your entire settlement? What was the real reason for that?
Bastard. Bastard. Bastard.
Did you hear those footsteps? Did you hear that? You heard that?
What was that?
I don't know what that was, but I did hear something. Mr. Cromwell, is that you? Are you here, Mr. Cromwell?
Something's touching me. Oh my god!
What's the matter? Hey, get back over here.
No, I'm getting out of... Go, no!
Get over here.
Go away, no!
Get back here. Get back here. Get back here.
I gotta...
What's going on? Well, I'm out here by myself. My crew and the new photographer, videographer, got scared and ran off, and I don't have infrared on this camera, so I have to find my way back in the dark all the way to the car. We're looking at a good 3 miles in the woods. So, what I'm going to do when I get back, I'm going to wait until the morning and get on camera and try to explain the best I can as to what the heck just happened here. All I know is these woods are violent. We got an awesome spirit here who is filled with energy and obviously doesn't want us near his gold. So, let me get out of here. Before I get to the findings, I have a few things to say. Last night, you clearly saw the videographer running out of the woods, scared to death with the crew. My normal videographer that I use, a gentleman by the name of Bob, couldn't make it that night, so we hired another team. And as you can clearly see, they were not prepared for what they encountered. And the reason for that is because there is safety in numbers. You get a whole group full of people, and I'll be darned if you're going to get a ghost to come up close and personal with you. I take very few on these investigations with me. Not only am I touched by the spirits, but so isn't the crew, as you clearly saw. Now let's get into our findings. The first finding that we found was the pendulum. Now pendulums have been used for dowsing to find water, minerals, and gold. And we were using it to contact John Cromwell and also to hopefully find his gold treasure. And you can clearly see it moving here. We made contact with him. The next bit of evidence are the Polaroid Instamatic pictures that you see. I use all sorts of medium. I use digital. I use 35mm. I use video, and I also use the Polaroid. Very important in capturing energy on the film. Now, in two of the pictures, got absolutely nothing. But the third photograph, you can clearly see again, a black mass. It was dark, but this was a very clear black mass. It was not there before. Now with the EVP, I asked the question simply, why did they run you out and burn you out of your settlement? What was the real reason? And it came back as clear as a bell. This is by far one of the clearest EVPs I have ever recorded.
Bastard. Bastard. Bastard.
Now another thing about EVPs and personalities of ghosts are they assume the personality of when they were alive. This gentleman, John Cromwell, was alive in 1656. He came from England. Therefore, the EVP should have an English accent. This one clearly did. And so having several others I have done of entities a couple hundred years old. Now the next bit of evidence, and y'all saw that, is when my team got touched by what I believe is John Cromwell.
Something's touching me. Oh my God.
What's the matter? Hey, get back over here.
No, I'm getting out of. Go, no.
Get over here.
Go away. No.
Get back here. And they left me in the woods. Wouldn't really minded that had they left me a flashlight. It was a little inconvenient having to walk all the way back. But I do understand why they were afraid. I'm seldomly afraid. Do get startled. What I'm more afraid of is the living, not the dead.
John Cromwell's spirit was healed by the truth that he indeed had a competitor when it came to trading with the Indians on the land he settled in 1656.
I want to thank Anheuser-Busch, and particularly the media representative out of St. Louis, Missouri, Per Scott. Thank you very much, Per, for giving us permission to come on Anheuser-Busch's property and to film our story about John Cromwell. I also want to thank the Anheuser-Busch Brewery for allowing us to pass through their facility and finding the original encampment of John Cromwell. I have one more thing to say before I close out this show, and that is I'm going to revert back to the original story from 1969. A newspaper reporter reported on where the actual treasure is. The treasure is, now listen up, the treasure was buried near the construction of the Anheuser-Busch Brewery, right at the corner or underneath the exact building. But no one really knows. This is CC the Huntress, and always remember, death does not end suffering.
I'm here to help you all. They call me the Huntress, CC. I wanna help you be free. I can hear you call. I'm here to help you all. They call me the Huntress, CC. I wanna help you be free.